Welcome to HFY Stories. Please subscribe to the channel. Your one click means the world to me. The countdown display read 4 minutes when Vex Cathara stopped writing. Around the chamber, translators were shouting into wrist communicators in 6 different languages, and none of the words being sent would arrive before the deadline did. Vex's stylus hovered over a datapad gone useless. There was no protocol entry for what do you do when a species smaller than your left forearm has quietly parked more warships in your territory than you have stars in your home system. 3 minutes, and High Chancellor Zorvethan of the Kralaxian Empire was staring at his own reflection in a dead viewscreen, looking for an answer that wasn't there. 10 hours earlier, none of them had known enough to be afraid. Vex remembered walking into the Grand Assembly Chamber of Station Omega-7 that morning thinking it would be an unremarkable session. Another human delegation asking politely for something the Council would politely refuse. 12,000 years of Morak observers had taught Vex's people to read a room before the room knew what it was about to become, and this room, at the start, had felt almost bored. Ambassador Elena Voss stood alone at the center of the floor, a single small figure ringed by delegates twice, 3 times, in some cases 9 times her mass. Zorvethan's 4 eyes glittered down at her with the specific fondness he reserved for things he considered already settled. Your species, he said, has applied for full council membership. The council has reviewed the application, denied, on grounds of demonstrated aggression. Interesting, Elena said. Which demonstration would that be? The pirate fleet we dismantled, or the colony we didn't let them enslave? General Craig's Morlax of the Brutalian Empire made a sound that might have been a laugh in his species. You lack the temperament for cooperation with civilized powers. Humanity has conquered nothing, controlled nothing. What exactly have you built that we should respect? Vex logged it without much interest. Another lecture on hierarchy, another human absorbing an insult with that flat, unreadable calm they were known for. What Vex didn't yet understand, hadn't had the months of study to understand, was that flat calm in a human wasn't submission. It was arithmetic. You measure worth in conquered worlds, Elena said. The Brutalians hold 47, the Kralaxians 62. By that math, Earth barely registers. She let the silence sit a beat too long. So let's talk about a different number. She set a data crystal on the podium. The chamber's projector woke, and lines of ship registries began scrolling, more of them than Vex's optic sensors wanted to process in one pass. 57,000 vessels, Elena said. 14,000 frontline combat ships, the rest convert to weapons platforms inside 6 hours. Someone near the ethereal delegation made a strangled noise. None of them are where your intelligence services have been looking. Advisor Prex Salanthi's voice came out thin. Our scans show barely 2,000 human ships in your home system. You scanned our system, Elena agreed. You never thought to scan yours. The projection shifted. A map of the sector bloomed with red markers, not clustered around Earth, but scattered through every trade lane, every shipyard, every fleet staging point belonging to someone else. Vex felt the calculation land in real time, 15 years of quiet positioning, inside everyone's blind spot at once. You've hidden a war fleet inside our own borders, Zorvethan said, and for the first time his voice cracked down the middle. We built a promise no one could break for us, Elena said. There's a difference, and you're about to learn it, because 3 days ago we intercepted mobilization orders. Yours, General. She looked at Craig's Morlax without blinking. 18 hours old, coded, but not coded well enough. That was the moment Vex's secondary nervous system started firing warnings it had no vocabulary for. Not fear exactly, recognition, the sense of watching a predator's stance shift half a second before the strike. Effective 6 hours ago, Elena went on. Human forces are authorized to engage any vessel within 10 light years of our territory showing hostile posture. Any species assisting that hostility loses trade access, loses infrastructure, loses whatever else we decide is proportionate. We didn't come here to threaten the Council. We came to explain what happens when patience gets mistaken for weakness one time too many. The recess that followed lasted 4 hours and felt, to Vex, like watching an ecosystem realize the water had already risen past the door. When the session reconvened, fear had a smell in that chamber, ozone from overworked cooling systems, dozens of species venting stress in dozens of chemical signatures Vex's translator didn't bother naming. One by one, the smaller delegations folded. The Maritime Alliance, the Merchant Guilds, the Crystalline Federation, all suddenly enthusiastic about human membership. 3 holdouts remained. Elena let the silence stretch until it became its own kind of pressure. "High Chancellor," she said, "you'll want assurances that we won't touch your borders." "Legally recognized territory," Zorvathan said stiffly. "You mean the Altarian Collective?" The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. "The trade routes you strangled until they begged for protection. We have the fleet logs. Should I play them?" Zorvathan said nothing. That silence was its own confession, and everyone in the chamber heard it. "Here's what happens if this doesn't end in a handshake." The display behind Elena changed again. Kralaxian shipyards, comms hubs, population centers, each blinking under a small blue targeting mark. "Operation Clean Slate doesn't conquer your empire, General, Chancellor. It ends it. Every installation goes dark at once. Every hyperlane into your space closes. Then one message goes to every world you've ever swallowed. Nobody owns you anymore." "You would erase everything we've built," Zorvathan whispered. "We'd erase everything you took," Elena said. "That's the whole difference, and you have 6 minutes to decide which side of it you want to be on, because that's when Earth Command expects my report either way." That was the 6 minutes Vex had walked into at the start of this account, the true peak of the whole crisis, the moment every calculation in the chamber finally came due at once. Vex watched Zorvathan's 4 eyes flick from Elena to the frozen viewscreen to the silent delegates around him, searching for a version of dignity that would still fit inside surrender, and finding none. Representative Slith Yex of the Yithrak hegemony spoke first, tentacles knotting around each other. "What does your species actually want? This cannot only be punishment." Elena's answer, when it came, wasn't loud. "We want to be left alone long enough to build things instead of defending them. We want a galaxy where nobody has to sit in a room explaining why bullying is wrong. That's the whole want. Everything else is just what happens if the answer is no." At 2 minutes, Zorvathan's shoulders dropped, and whatever fight remained went out of him all at once. "The Kralaxian Empire accepts your terms." At 1 minute, Craig's Morlax spat his acceptance out like it cost him blood and pride in equal measure. Slith Yex went last, tentacles finally stilling. "The hegemony accepts." Elena thumbed her communicator without any visible relief. "Earth Command, this is Voss. Diplomatic resolution reached. Clean slate stands down. Repeat, stand down." The chamber exhaled as one organism. Delegates who'd spent 10 hours calculating their own extinction odds slumped into their seats, wiping sweat and worse from a dozen different kinds of skin. Vex watched Elena's face for triumph and found none there, only the tiredness of someone who had carried something heavy for a very long time and had just, finally, been allowed to set it down. The formal signing took another hour, treaty language, territorial clauses, the Altarian Collective's independence written into council record, while its former overseers watched in silence. By the time it ended, half the delegates looked as though they'd aged a decade in a single day. Vex caught Elena at the chamber door as the last of the council filed out. "Would you have actually done it? Clean slate." Elena studied the Morak observer for a long moment, and something in her eyes went very still and very old. "We spent 15 years building the option, so we'd never have to use it. Nobody builds something like that as a bluff." Vex believed her completely and understood, watching her walk out into the corridor lights, that the belief was the whole lesson, that a species which never had to raise its fleet again had just proven, in a single afternoon, exactly why it never would. Back at the observation desk, Vex opened a blank report and typed one line before anything else. Recommendation: do not test them twice. Then set the stylus down beside the data Crystal Alina had left behind, its projection long since faded, the red dots gone dark across a map that no longer needed to threaten anyone at all.